Hello and welcome to Analysis with me, John Rees. Alleged abuses of Iraqi prisoners by UK soldiers are to be investigated by the International Criminal Court. The investigation has been prompted by new reports of nearly 60 incidents in which prisoners were unlawfully killed and more than 170 reports in which detainees were abused and tortured at the hands of the British military. The UK government has expressed outrage at the decision. They say they're already investigating incidents of abuse and torture and that the ICC investigation will undermine positive work done by the British Army. The Attorney-General, Dominic Grieve, said the UK government has been and remains a strong supporter of the ICC and will provide the Office of the Prosecutor with whatever is necessary to demonstrate that British justice is following its proper course. So, can the existing UK-based internal inquiry reveal the truth? And where does this leave the reputation of the British Army? Joining me in the studio is Professor Bill Bowring of Birkbeck College, University of London, and Peter Marsden, Programme Coordinator for Concordis International. Welcome to the programme, both of you. Bill, this has emerged out of the blue. What's prompted this?
It's not actually out of the blue, and
this
is the second time. This is the second time, because I was one of the authors of the first report that went to the then prosecutor at the ICC, Mr. Ocampo.
And this was back in 2006.
And that was about 2000. Well, we did this in 2003, 2004, and he rejected it in 2006 and sent it back to us. But that was actually on the use of particular weapons in the invasion and occupation of Iraq in 2003. And what's happened since then is that a very, very good organisation in Germany, the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, headed by a German lawyer, Wolfgang Kalleck. They've been involved in trying to prosecute Donald Rumsfeld, for example, over the years. And public interest lawyers, headed by Phil Shiner. Now, public interest lawyers have taken the cases against the UK, which have gone to the European Court of Human Rights, Al-Skani and Al-Jeddah, and were involved in Abu Musa, and presently doing the Al-Swedi cases. So, and actually, just a short while ago, there was a presentation at the Law Society, headquarters of the solicitors in England and Wales, in Chancery Lane, of a big dossier, a really huge dossier put together by ECCHR and public interest lawyers, detailing a whole lot of abuses. And of course, the point is, this is all now quite a long time ago, and if the British government has been so assiduous in following up and prosecuting, then why do we not have the results? And I think the point is that actually, despite Phil Shiner taking case after case and fighting every inch of the way, being opposed every inch of the way by the government, it's finally come to the point where the new ICC prosecutor says, this is something I've got to investigate.
So let's just to get this straight, there's new information, there's this stack of stuff that you're describing that's been sent to them, and basically the ICC is saying to the British government,
they're not saying anything yet, but saying this is something we have to take seriously and investigate.
But the gist of it is that the British government isn't moving fast enough, is that?
I don't think they would have taken that step if they felt the British government had been moving fast enough. And don't forget, as the Attorney General said, the International Criminal Court is something the UK strongly supports. We have a judge there. It's something which is quite high on the agenda for us. Up until now, they've only been prosecuting cases in Africa. And so I think it's very important for them as well that they seem to be taking up a case outside of Africa.
Peter, is that how you read this? That is a kind of prod at the British government to get on with it, at least that?
It certainly is a prod, and it's a needed prod. One of the interesting issues with the International Criminal Court is that it has jurisdiction to fight cases or bring cases if it considers that those cases are not being properly investigated and prosecuted, either through willingness or through ability in the citizen's own country. So British citizens who are members of Her Majesty's Armed Forces could be prosecuted by that court if it was felt or deemed that there was not being a proper prosecution here in the UK. And to the extent that that is the implication by the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor, that those have not been properly prosecuted, well, then that will be something of a rebuke or at least a wake-up call for the British government and the British legal system.
So do you think that this is simply a question of tardiness, or do you think that an internal inquiry of the kind that we've got is, let's put it this way, less able to get at the truth than perhaps an ICC one would be?
Well, it's an interesting matter because there have been previous attempts at prosecuting, and I think any suggestion that gets put out there that there hasn't been any willingness by the British government or by the British legal system to bring prosecutions of members of the armed forces is not quite correct. Though we could have some discussions about whether a court's tribunal is a free, fair and open system of prosecution. But there have been prosecutions brought, and in fact previously when cases came to international attention, it then transpired that actually a tribunal had already been brought, and those soldiers were being prosecuted. What happened there, though, was that it was deemed the soldiers closed ranks. And then at that point, it wasn't possible, according to the verdict of the tribunal, it was not possible for them to ascertain who had done what. Okay. That raises quite an interesting evidential burden.
Well, let's just come back to that second point. But before we get back to that, Bill, the actual inquiry that's taking place in Britain at the moment, it's an internal services inquiry headed by somebody who's been in charge of internal services inquiries in the past. Is that right?
Well, there have been a variety of things. There have been courts martial. There was a judicial review. There is the Al Swedi case. Cases which are still going on. So there's been a whole series of things. But actually, and if indeed the problem was systemic, and not just the case of one or two bad apples, then I think something very significant in the past day or so is Colonel Nicholas Mercer, who was the senior army lawyer in Iraq at the time, has just gone public again, as a matter of fact. He now serves with me as a trustee of the Redress Trust that works for torture survivors.
And what's he said?
Very outspoken, of the dreadful things that he saw. And what he got to know about was indeed something which was systemic, not just a case of a few bad apples, as it were, and something which did need to be properly investigated from top to bottom.
Well, a lot rests on this, doesn't it, Peter? I mean, whether or not it's a minority of soldiers acting on kind of impulse or under the pressures of war or whatever, or whether this is sanctioned up the command chain. And this is what really decides whether or not